So we're on, okay, we're on a weird version of Daybreak. Void, why is it void? Huh. Let's play Spot the Difference and see if we can tell what is going on with this Daybreak map. Why isn't it the normal one? I don't know. Anyway, it is Wyrm versus CrimsonTide. And Wyrm, again, as the Protoss, won the first game, you know, without really too much bother. If you were Wyrm playing it, it would have felt pretty stressful, because you would have had to assume that your opponent had an army, and you took a lot of damage. You had harass coming at you. You lost Storm, you lost the Templar Archives, and you lost an entire mineral line to one Widow Mine, which is so painful. So, you know, if you're in that position, you would feel like you're behind. You would feel like it wasn't going very well for you. But unfortunately, Exeter MS wasn't backing that up with macro at home. So, you know, the drops were very good, got a lot done. But, you know, if you're not building an army, then kind of always remember, like, if you take out somebody's entire mineral line, from their point of view, they're thinking, right, my opponent is ahead of me economically, so the longer I wait, the further I get behind. Therefore, a quite common response is to just go, YOLO, let's go. Let's go right now, because with every minute that passes, I will be further behind than I am at the minute. So now is the time to attack. And you've also got on your side the idea that if they've successfully done a drop, if they've successfully done that harass, that is supply, that is APM, that is money, resources that they have spent and invested into doing that, that isn't time, money, resources, APM invested into building an army. So there's a reasonable chance you've got the bigger army at that moment. But obviously if you wait, you won't have. So, you know, you should always bear that in mind when you do something that does catastrophic damage to someone's economy. There is a really strong chance their next action is to A-click across the map and come and kill you, or at least try. You know, so generally a good response from the person that's done that damage is to think about static D, is to think about throwing down a couple of bunkers, making sure you can see off what comes for you, because then you're in a fantastic position. Then you've defeated their army and you've hurt their economy, crippled their economy, and you're ahead in all sorts of ways. Okay. There are 3 racks coming down here. So we've got the reactor, we've got the tech lab researching STIM. This looks like CrimsonTide is not going to be mucking about here, is going to go and put on some hurt. The NG bay is finished, but the +1 isn't upgrading just yet, and I'd love to see the +1 started. It does take a while, +1, so you really do need to get it fired up straight away if you're going to do this push. So the worker comes in, sees 2 Marines. 2 Marines is not a suspicious amount at the 3-minute mark. You know, so I do quite like I don't know if it was planned, but not showing all of the Marines is a wise choice. You know, don't pull all your Marines down here and let a worker come in and give the game away. Have them back here or something like that, and only have a couple out the front to kill the worker or to kill the scout. This looks like the same build as before from Wyrm. Gateway into Expo, into Cybe, into Robo, into Doublegate. Yeah, it looks very familiar. Now, on this occasion, there hasn't been a Reaper Scout. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. But normally, if somebody doesn't scout you at all, it means they're coming for you. Because, you know, you have to scout, don't you? You've got to scout. You have to. You have to know what your opponent's doing. Unless your plan is to turn up in their base at less than 5 minutes, in which case it doesn't really matter. There's no point in scouting. It's not going to change what you're doing. You are playing all in. You are playing fast. So you see, finally +1 starts, but it's miles away. What's the timing on this going to be like? Stim is done. Let's see the Stim button go down. Crimson going to focus down the shield battery, and that is reasonably sensible. Yeah, I don't think there's quite enough here. You know, I don't know. Combat Shield so close to finishing, and Combat Shield would have added essentially close to 20% toughness to these Marines. Yeah, let's just go back and look at that again, because, you know, army supply wise, Crimson is well ahead, but some of it is building. There are 2 Marauders and 2 Marines halfway across the map when this engages. So even though the supply looks pretty far ahead, you know, the 2 Marauders and 2 Marines, that's 6 supply less that is actually not even in the fight at all. So that makes it look quite a lot more balanced. And without the combat shield, with a shield battery, you kind of expect, yeah, fair enough, the Protoss probably wins that. So Crimson, what's the follow-up plan here? I still feel like that +1 could have just made such a big difference. You know, because if that had started as soon as the engineering bay had finished, it would have been finishing up at about the same time as combat shield. And you could have just waited here for the whole army to show up and pushed in with +1 and combat shield. And then I think we would have had a very different outcome. I think we would have killed everything. But we'll see. It looks like Crimson is just going to go for this. I mean, it's hard to... There's a couple of Marauders in here, which is great. That the shield battery hasn't been replaced, and there is no Robotech out just yet. So when these additional units turn up, +1 is how far away. You know, I never have installed the thing that tells you how far away upgrades are. But yeah, you know, the thing to do here is to wait for that +1 and push in. But this is quite a lot of Stalkers. Yeah, 7 Stalkers. 7 Stalkers beats this, doesn't it? You know, even with +1. And the engage is going to annoyingly happen just before +1 finishes. You know, no medevacs yet either. So, I don't know. This looks like it's a problem for CrimsonTide. Yeah, it looks like a problem. What could she have done different? You know, arguably, if you are just going for that really early Marine push, personally, I go 5 racks. I don't bother with the reactor. It just takes too long. It's quicker to build another racks. It actually is, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, I would go barracks, and once that barracks finishes up, depot, gas, full saturation, drop the mules, and then drop 4 more racks, and just pull down the A button. I wouldn't worry too much about the Marauders. Okay, this is coming across the map and is going to see, what is it going to see? Sees that there's a little handful of units here at this Silnaga tower, but it's going to make its way across, and if you're Wyrm, you're going to be pretty pleased with what you see. You know, there's still units streaming across the map, so that smacks of your opponent doesn't have a backup plan here. It is, this has to kill me. So all I've got to do is not let it kill me. And there are 2 Colossus here. So these Marines, especially the ones that are already hurt, are going to melt so fast. There is a shield battery with full energy. There's an Immortal to work on the Marauders as well. The siege tank is great, but a medevac is what this desperately, desperately needs. And it's just started now. So that is going to be a while. Now, one thing you can do as Crimson in this position, she does snipe the observer, and that's great, but you know that your opponent has seen you here. You know that your opponent is aware that you're parked outside. There's a good chance then that they're feeling pretty nervy about you pushing in. So just expo. Just don't push in and just be like, yeah, I'm going to keep you nervous. I'm going to keep posturing, but I'm not actually going to come at you. The scan is pretty good, sees most of the army and sees the Archons merging in as well. Sees enough to realise that, no, I'm not going to push into that. I wish this siege tank was sieged up, because stuff coming through this choke would be taking a nice battering from it. This isn't a fight that you can take, Crimson. You need to run. You need to run quite fast. I'd be inclined to pick up the siege tanks and the medevacs and get them the hell out of there. Otherwise, I think these charge lots are going to pick them off, and that is pretty painful. Yeah, does pick up one of the siege tanks, so that's good. Yeah, you can start a step against these, but you need to be careful, because you don't want to be standing there trying to fight when the Colossus turn up. This siege tank hasn't a clue where it's going, why it wasn't sieged up back here. We don't know. Oh no, the medevac with the siege tank gets sniped. So mismanagement from the medevacs. It wasn't the crispest push, and that was all a bit painful, wasn't it? You know, the later part of that game looked one-sided, but that is entirely because the initial push didn't quite win. That game was actually very, very close. Even if it didn't look very close, it was very, very close. Crimson just didn't quite have enough to break the Stalkers and the Shield Battery at the very start, but it was closer than it looked. You know, 2 more Marauders across the map, Combat Shield finished up, and the game probably goes the other way. All of the Stalkers die, and from there, Crimson just continues to push, and you know, Wyrm would have had no option but to fight with workers, and it would have turned nasty very quickly. But once Wyrm managed to hold that, Crimson didn't really have a comeback. It was very all in. There was no expo, there was no tech, there was no factory, no starport, so very, very hard to come back from that position. So actually a closer game than it looked.